לא טוב, וציוונו לעשות ודברי תורה. Okay, here we go. By me, it is not a sunny day, but maybe it's sunny by you.
The middle of the night here.
Where are you? You're in Florida?
We're in Hawaii, and yeah, this is.
Rabbi Davids, you're muted.
Rabbi Davids, you got muted.
I know, and I saw the person who. I'll take care of him later. Okay. This is super. Okay, so it's good to be back together again with everybody. Let's see, Jonathan Weisberg. Jonathan Weisberg, how are you related to this guy, Howard?
He is my father. That handsome devil.
I thought he was your brother.
Okay, so if I can be of any help to you, feel free to contact me, Okay, that's great. You had a great bar mitzvah. Everything is good. Terrific. This is Shabbat Parah. Shabbat Parah. One of the Sabbaths preceding Passover, Pesach. You know that the 15th of April, Friday evening, is first Seder. And I say that only so that you have a chance to go out and spend all kinds of money in making this thing work for you. So, April 15th, Erev Pesach. Are you ready? Do you have your chosen Haggadah? There are only several thousand among which to choose. And it's good. It's good. I liked it in the good old days. We used the Soviet Jewry Haggadah. We screamed and yelled and brought 1 million Jews out of Russia just because of our Seder. Okay.
We used the Maxwell House Haggadah when I was a kid.
Yeah, so did everyone else in the world. Today, I need to say something with clarity. It's not my style. Do not pay any attention to the bulletin announcements this week regarding the current events class. Whatever you see in the synagogue bulletin, don't pay any attention. Why? Class on March 30th is canceled. It still may show up in the bulletin or something. I hope not, but I just don't want you to be confused. Risa and I are going to Tucson to be with a very, very, very close friend who has suffered great loss. And there's an academic lecture, a memorial lecture, and I'm going to be participating in that. So we're going to be in Tucson Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So that means, again, do not pay any attention to announcements that say current events is happening. It's not. I asked if we could get coverage. That didn't work out all that well. Okay. More calendar. We resume April 13th in the current events class. Can't wait. Jim Ruxin.
Hi. So tonight we're going to discuss Licorice Pizza, which I didn't realize how controversial a film it had become. And our topic of discussion will not be so much about the film itself. It's sort of a romantic comedy set among teenagers in the Valley in the 1970s. It's about the wokeness and the critical race theory issues that the film brings up because of some controversial scenes. And I think we can take time tonight not to get academic, but to talk about what do we do when somebody misconstrues something, whether it's what a politician says, rightly or wrongly. What do we do about differences of perception among ourselves? And how can we parse that out? Why do people have different opinions? I also have an announcement. On On April 3rd, I'll be giving a presentation at the Glazer campus, anticipating Passover. Some of you have seen the film about the Shik Haggadah that I've made,
Of course, yes.
and seen the exhibit of various older Haggadahs, or Haggadot, if you prefer, that I present along with the film. But we're going to do that 9:30 Sunday morning, April 3rd. It'll be in the calendar this coming week, in the bulletin. And it's designed for the parents of religious school people who are dropping their children off at the Glazer campus. So we hope to get a large response there, but everybody is welcome, including non-members. And I hope to see you there. It's a 17-minute film. We'll probably show another short film about the artist Arthur Szyk. But this is the famous Haggadah where the ancient Egyptians were shown to be, were compared to present-day Nazis. Szyk completed his work in 1937. So it's a powerful book, powerful piece of art, and a very important part of Jewish activism. So I look forward to seeing you there.
Yeah, well, thank you. I've gotten good education from Jim about how animators, film producers used their access to the public to do battle with the Nazis during World War II.
Yeah.
Pretty amazing stuff. Okay, thank you for that. Cindy, where is it? Cindy, there you are.
Sisterhood had a tour of the Glazer campus last week, and it was wonderful. Any former university members, if you haven't had a tour of the sanctuary, it's not just walking in and being amazed. There's just so much to learn about everything that's in the sanctuary. We also had a tour of the pavilion, which I think is controversial. But Nan Goodman is the tour leader, and she's very happy to offer tours to any groups. If you're in a Havarah, you can have your Havarah. And we're planning Shabbat high tea and learning the end of April, and the registration will come out probably in 2 weeks.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Okay. Thank you for that. We are now going to shift to Leviticus 10, 1-3. And in the Plout, New Plout 709, in the WRJ Women's Commentary 620. I spoke about this Thursday night on my Facebook posting, and I got an amazing amount of comment about what we're going to be talking about. Some people were upset, some people were intrigued, and I consider that a win-win. Some upset, some intrigued. That's a good place to be. We are in Leviticus 10, 1-3. Leviticus 10, 1-3. You know this story. You absolutely know this story. The story of Nadav and Avihu. Okay, can someone please tell me, since I asserted that you know it, who were Nadav and Avihu? Who were Nadav and Avihu?
Aaron's sons.
Two of Aaron's sons, right? Two of Aaron's sons, the two older sons, Nadav and Avihu. Where's Mona? I mean, we can get Mona to do this. The mise en scène. We are now in having completed the 7-day ritual of dedicating the tabernacle, dedicating the priest. Everything is ready to get going. It is Yom Shmini, 8th day. 7-day, all the inaugural events. Now it's the 8th day. And look what happens. Aaron's sons, Nadav and Avihu, each took his fire pan, put fire in it, laid incense on it, and they offered before the eternal alien fire. The Hebrew, Eish Zara. I guess alien fire is good. Do not believe that we're talking about space aliens, but it is alien fire, which had not been enjoined upon them. And fire came forth from the eternal and consumed them. Thus they died at the instance of the eternal. Then Moses said to Aaron, this is what the eternal meant by saying, through those near to me, I show myself holy and gain glory before all the people. And Aaron, the bereaved father, was silent. End of story. This is a fascinating, challenging, ethical, moral, divine justice kind of event. Nadav and Avihu already were ordained as priests. They're in the business. They got certified over the 7 days. They come and they offer Eish Zara. We don't know what that means. Alien fire, strange fire, alien fire. And instead of their incense and so forth being consumed by the divine fire, the fire descended from heaven and consumed them. Moses, who did not have a degree in counseling, said to his brother, if you get close to God, you're playing with fire. That's a little stretch. If you get close to God, you are in danger. And a very powerful lesson. And Aaron fell silent. Now, how do you react to this, folks? You know the story, okay? How do you react to it? Cindy?
I have a hard reaction because I like to think of God as being loving and forgiving. And these two boys did something wrong. We don't know exactly what was wrong, and they're killed for it.
Thank you. You certainly put the issue out in front of us. Okay, what else? Any other reaction to what is going on in these little 3 verses, Harv?
I have a question. Moses just lost 2 nephews, correct? And he seems not to have any feelings one way or another towards his nephews. Is anything in the Jewish liturgy talk about that?
In Jewish liturgy, I don't know, but as a question, surely. Yes, Moses lost 2 nephews. And by the way, there were 4, and this was important to set up the structure and inheritance. And now they've been cut in half. Only 2 direct from Aaron. What do you think, folks? How do you react to this? How do you react to this story?
I'm with Cindy.
I'm sorry?
I said I'm with Cindy.
Okay.
I don't understand. I have a different vision, I guess, of God, though I don't know why anyone would say you're playing with fire or you're in danger, because I don't think you have to play with God. God supposedly knows everything we're doing whenever we're doing it. So I kind of don't get the danger part, or that you're playing with fire. I think you kind of have to learn how to work with God, and instead of killing them, maybe the message is they should have been taught what God is all about.
Well, I think that in context, we're talking about a time where God is giving a bunch of very rigid rules and strictures about what the priest should do and how they should be treated by the people and their role. And this is almost the equivalent of idolatry, in the sense that when you deviate from this structure, you're not setting the right example, you're not following the rules, and that has to be dealt with harshly. Now, whether that's a good thing or bad is a different issue, but I think in the context of what's going on at this time and what they're talking about in these sections of the Torah, I think that's the important message.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to go to let's see, we're going to go to Ray and then to Jim and Brad.
I sort of have,
you're not Ray.
oh, hello.
Okay.
Well, I was wondering if these two were the first to be killed in a long while, or were they the first to be killed that we've read about?
Well, you're really at the beginning of the beginning of the beginning. These are the first priests. They're ordained, they're installed. This is the first. So there were no priests before them in terms of the Jewish world.
But as to people that are just, I mean, it's as though we've just taken out the trash. It's so carefree, this description of we're going to kill these two, and we've killed these two, God killed them. And it doesn't seem like anybody's emotional about it or even reacting to it. And so I was wondering too, if they were the first that have been killed at all in the Torah so far that we've read. I don't remember God killing anybody.
Well, if you go through Genesis, don't talk to the folks at Sodom. God pretty much.
I mean, specific characters, specific people with names. You know, we've killed people, but we haven't killed any, have we? Named people?
I'm trying to think. I put the reflection button on. I don't know. Tamara, do we have any?
In Genesis 38, two of Judah are killed for improper sexual behavior or evil.
Who were they?
The sons of Judah. His oldest two sons, first one and the other.
Okay, so there you go. Some were killed. We're going to go on. I had an order here. Jim, then Brad. Okay, and I see Kevin.
Steve Miller actually said it so well. There's not much more for me to say. The point is that I think the key here is alien fire, that this was a creative, invented kind of ritual worship that was blasphemous. And that's why such a punishment was meted out to them. And we've seen other warnings of you shall be smote if you do this or that. And I think this is a very stern example, an illustration of it. Don't get too creative with this. Don't get too interpretive. We have a way of doing things. And we know this material was written with hindsight in mind, trying to assign to ancient times the ordering the sacrifices and the structure of religious practice. So, it's written with hindsight, but it's a warning of the rabbis who wrote it about how much we can interpret what is laid down by them.
Thank you, Brad.
I can't help but think always of the Prometheus story here. Prometheus, who stole fire from the gods and then was punished for it. And we know that fire was a property of our God because our God traveled with us with fire by night. So fire is a property of God. It ends up in human hands, and you can't help but wonder if there isn't a similar punishment as was exacted upon Prometheus.
Thank you. Kevin.
Okay, there are two things that I wanted to say. The first was that this was in front of everyone that they saw the sons of Aaron being killed. And it's the reactions of Moses and Aaron that is being seen, which is they're not sad, they're not upset, they accept what God has to do. And that's what everyone else in the community has to understand, is that it's God's will, and for everything that's going on. So it really does show the community, I guess, a huge example. The other thing I wanted to say is in the Torah, we always see the firstborn son is not always the one that has God's blessing. And, sometimes the younger siblings want to rise to power or whatever. And I don't know if there's a struggle there, but that's, one thing I wanted to point out.
Interesting. Okay, very good. Jonathan.
To me, one thing possibly a way of looking at this is that it's about sort of corruption or authority in the power that's given to the Aaronite priesthood and Aaron and his sons. That's a great deal of authority, importance, and power that they're getting, that they have to be the priests. They get to be the priests, which is a very important position, and they have to then follow all these rituals. And they've just been given the direct rituals from God. Here's how you're supposed to do it. So you have almost immediately that some of them come forward and do it the wrong way. And the text, I don't think, makes it very clear what their motivation is. Why is they making this mistake or doing it the wrong way? But I think one message that could be taken from it saying is they have to do it right because they get so much from this position. We can't allow them to be corrupt or lazy in their tasks. They have to do it right. It's so important. They just got the message from God. If you're not going to do it, then you can be sure this is. This is very compassionate in a way, but it is perhaps a limitation on people who are getting so much power. Aaron's descendants are still, presumably at the time this is being written, in authority, have a lot of power based on saying I'm descended from Aaron. And so they need to do their job right. Otherwise, perhaps they're being corrupt. If they're lazy in how they light the fire, they might be lazy in how they account for donations they receive or how they spend money for the temple or who they eat, what food they eat or things like that.
Thank you.
How luxurious they're living.
That's great. Let's see where we go. Mona and then Ray.
I was just going to say, I disagree with a few things that have been said. I don't think it's carefree. I think it's a demonstration of extraordinary power. Great story to scare children half to death. Instantaneous power. You do something wrong, that's it. I also think that Aaron standing silent is quite the opposite of saying that he's not emotional. I mean, this is the guy who's been the eloquent spokesman in a lot of situations. So I'm assuming he's numb with grief, devastated, but recognizing the power of God is unable to utter a word. So I don't think it's indifference to death or cruelty or a lack of emotional cognizance of the severity of the situation. To the contrary, to me, the silence is very eloquent.
Eloquent silence. Ray.
Is it inconsistent to read this text as though this was an accidental fire, that maybe these two had some combustible material on themselves and the fire came forth from the Lord? My reading is you don't have to assume this was the punishment. Everything comes from the Lord. The fire comes from the Lord, and maybe this was just an accident. And everybody stood around in awe, looking at it. Do we have to go to the punishment aspect of this and still be consistent with the text?
How do you feel, Ray?
I think we're jumping ahead. I think you can read this and not reach the conclusion that it was a punishment. It's something that just happened and everybody was awestruck. And they assumed it.
Okay, go ahead. Please, go ahead.
That's all I have to say.
Oh, okay, Howard?
I feel like this is just a fragment of a story. I think a lot has been left out, and that people maybe a long time ago would have known much more from the oral tradition that had survived up to that time what was going on. So it's very hard to know what's going on here because whoever cut out the fragment to put in here left a lot of rough edges.
Yeah, it's pretty short, 3 verses to take care of 2 sons of Aaron being killed. And what does that mean? It's not fully developed.
I think there's, at least in the face of it, there's a pretty strong, what's left in is a very strong message that if you don't follow the exact words of God, you're gonna get crushed like a bug.
Oh, that's lovely. Ray Kusarin. Ray, no.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, I'm breaking my usual rule of not participating when I don't have the text in front of me because that's disrespectful. But I am noticing something worth exploring and just want to mark it. I am struck by a sort of rhyming moment in Torah that I had never thought about before, which is the idea of alien fire and the sort of counterpoint to it for me, if we contemplate the burning bush and the revelation in a bush that is burning with fire but not consumed. And it is very hard for me not to think that that is a kind of alien fire. And I don't know what to do with this observation yet, but it just came to me. And it seems to me that there is an inherent and very challenging contradiction in here for us to explore, something about the nature of alien fire being okay when the right kind of being does it. But certainly something about alien fire seems to unite and contrast these 2 moments. And I'm fascinated by the idea, even if I don't know what to do about it yet.
I understand. Last comment will be from Jonathan.
I have a question or something that to me that feels bad about this, that comes off really poorly, is Moses' statement that this is how God gains glory, by doing this. He demonstrates something. This is how he gains glory before all the people, which feels like a very not so meaningful kind of thing, the glory before the people as opposed to some inherent glory or something. I don't know if it feels different in the original Hebrew or something like that, but especially if I think a lot of the people, if as a lot of people here, you feel it as a kind of a negative thing God is doing or overreacting. If one of the reasons is this very selfish thing to gain glory before the people, I think that comes off poorly or makes the whole thing feel particularly sort of dirty or wrong or violent or unfair or something like that.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you all. One of the things that no one did was say, this is not a problem for me because God is capricious, easy to anger, slow to forgive, and has a quick trigger finger. No one said that. The questions being asked were, what did Nadav and Avihu do to warrant this? I'm gonna invite you into a private part of my life, and to mention that, excuse me, Tamara is the one who made this happen. A few months ago, I met a Christian theologian, PhD, named Jesper Svartvik. Jesper Svartvik. Jesper is one of those unique Bible scholars, Protestant minister, Swedish background, who is devoting much of his life to creating patterns of understanding and respect between Jews and Christians. Very, very powerful and important man. So after we had lunch, I found myself in possession of a book that my friend Tamara said, here, read this. And I, of course, have no choice. So I did, part of it anyway, so far. And I came away with a really interesting insight. Svartvik speaks about pre-understanding. Pre-understanding. People don't go out into the world tabula rasa blank. People go out into the world with an interpretational framework. We carry that framework with us. Because of that framework, we see the events of our world or texts through the lens of that pre-understanding. Prepackaged. Every one of us, every one of us goes through life with a package of understandings about what is really important. Svartvik called them pre-understandings. You know what we were involved in today so far? Pre-understandings that God is just, that God is fair, that God is not cruel, that God does not have a very sensitive trigger finger. Because we have all been raised one way or another with the understanding, a pre-understanding, God is this way. And when we're confronting a challenge, we have to put what is happening into a pre-understanding framework. Now, I talked about this Thursday evening, and I was so glad to get a bunch of comments back saying, what the hell are you talking about? I accept that. But it was, something that people had trouble with. If you look back on all the ways which we responded to Nadav and Avihu, there were pre-understandings, right? God is fair and just, loving and forgiving. So now let's look and worry about what Nadav and Avihu did to deserve this. We never ask, what's wrong with God that God would have done this? And I have been mulling this over for the last 4 days, and I'm fascinated. When the Israelites were enslaved, we have no hesitancy of attributing to God grand motives. They will be enslaved. I'll bring them out. They'll go to the land. They'll be a chosen people. But not one of us is going to raise the question on Pesach, what if God messed up? What if God is not just? Why do we assume a pre-understanding that God is this way and no other way? Think about how you view God. I don't necessarily want to jump into the Holocaust imagery, but it is available in there. Constant looking for reasons to excuse God as opposed to condemning God. Let me stop because there's a lot. Steve?
Well, I think there's a lot of reasons why. One of them is the innate nature of a God, that God doesn't make mistakes. That's part and parcel of the being or spirit or whatever. But even more importantly, if you don't accept that, why on earth would we worship a God or follow rules purportedly set down by this God? It would undermine the very existence of religion and belief and reasons for how we should live our life. So there has to be some fundamental basis for believing that ultimately we worship this creator because it leads us on the right path. And a God that's always making mistakes and being mean doesn't merit that kind of attention or respect.
Yes, okay. Do we have any other comments? Any other? This is really, for me, I'm sure you're bored silly. For me, very, very interesting. Why do we let God get away with it because of our pre-understanding that God is Adonai, Adonai, El Rachum, V'chanuneh, Rechapayim, V'rav Chesed V'emet. God is long-suffering, compassionate, forgiving. We do this on the high holidays. Why do we let God get away with it? Why is that true just because that is the atmosphere within which we were raised? That's a question, not an answer. But I love that the question is asked. Okay, Howard.
I don't usually bring this up because it gets people all freaked out, but if you forget what we learned from reciting the ritual over and over again and actually use your eyes and look at the world, then you have to have the evidence is so strong that if God exists, God is a cranky old man who doesn't really care about us and plays with us like a little child playing with a butterfly and pulling the wings off.
I don't like that image.
But it's true, isn't it? I mean, if you looked at the evidence, where do you see the evidence of compassion or caring or love? I don't see it. Look at that little girl that was on TV that had her face shot by the Russians yesterday. What's that about?
And that's what pre-understanding that Svartvik wants to talk about tries to deal with. We have a perceptual tunnel, and everything has to adjust into it. So, for example, the Christian world has the experience of the cross. The Jewish world has the experience of Mount Sinai. Both events have to be understood, pre-understood, for us to begin to understand why Judaism and Christianity emerged from these events. Why? What this pre-understanding does to me is rip apart my feeling that I can be objective and honest and look at the world and see what's right. And Svartvik is saying, you believe that because you've been conditioned to believe that. Doesn't mean you're wrong. Merle.
So I'm thinking that, or I'm asking you, I guess, is part of this because this whole preconditioning, because from the time we were little kids and we were taught Torah in Sunday school and wherever else we learned it, Torah was written by people, and the perception there is that they wrote stories. And did God write the 10 Commandments or did people write the 10 Commandments? So now I'm questioning, we've been pre-educated, and the assumption is if God didn't write the Torah and people wrote the Torah, What are they trying to teach us?
It becomes a very different question, doesn't it?
It's like a vicious circle.
Okay. Anyone else want to jump in before we move on? I am. Okay. Effie. And then Harv or Mara. Okay, Mara. I'm sorry.
This is very difficult for me to talk about. You know, I lived through World War II, and it was very hard because my father was in the newspaper business, and every day he had stories about what happened during World War II and the Nazis. And I lived through other wars. But in the last 4 years, I don't understand God anymore. The way my wife is suffering. So it has made me very questionable of why God allows something like this.
Thank you for sharing that, Effie. Thank you. Thank you. Mara?
Okay, go.
All of us, as we speak about this issue, are trying to reason it out. And that assumes the precondition that you can reason, that reason is the ultimate way of understanding. And if we suspend that belief and assume that there is some other way of understanding God or understanding our world, then I think that makes sense in terms of the argument that's being made by this person.
Okay, I'm not sure where that goes.
I'm not sure. Well, I'm not sure where that goes in terms of explaining this story, but I think it suggests to us that when we say this is just or this is unjust, that we're trying to figure out the reason for something. To me, it's like looking at a light bulb and trying to understand where the electricity comes from. When
I've never understood that.
So in the same way, I think it's trying to understand God and our world when we're using the wrong tools to do that. In a kind of a crude way, that's why I meditate, to try and understand God in a different way.
Thank you. Thank you. Does anybody else want to come in on this?
Rabbi?
Please.
Yeah, I think this preconditioning idea kind of assumes that we're living in a bubble. We're living in a Jewish bubble. Christians are living in a Christian bubble. But in fact, I mean, I come back to Prometheus. When we think of Greek gods and Roman gods, they were totally flawed. They were jealous, they were lascivious, they had every frailty imaginable. They were far from loving and perfect and all of those things. So we don't live, we're not preconditioned by one set of ideas. We live in a world where we're exposed to multiple concepts of deities.
Yes. What do we do with those though, Brad?
Well, for example, in this particular story, I mean, I saw a lot of a classical Greek, Roman type of influence. I see a God who is jealous of his fire and it being taken away by these unknowing humans. So I don't see a perfect God in this story.
You have so hit the nail on its head. You know that you have been conditioned to have pre-understandings, and you want to shake off those pre-understandings so you can approach things with a questing mind. And that's why I mentioned Svartvik. That is precisely why. Natalie.
Yes, I think what we haven't mentioned in this whole discussion is fear. I think that most people who are religious, they are fearful that if they do the wrong things, God is going to be angry with them. And that is definitely a control factor. How were these people ever going to believe that God existed, that this invisible God was anything real without fear that was presented to them? And what worse can it be than killing 2 sons? I know you have said before in these classes that God gets a little bit nicer as the Torah goes on, but God is pretty bad. He just gets mad. He gets rid of a whole group of people. He gets mad, you're going to be punished. And yet in our life, the way we live today, we like to turn this around and say, oh, there are good reasons for all these things. But power of any kind behind it is fear. Even when you go to school, you're afraid if you do something wrong, the teacher will give you a bad mark. At home, if you do something wrong, that your mother will not love you anymore. There is always fear behind behavior. And we're turning it around, most of us, saying how good all of this is, and we're not going to pay attention to this. But as the text reads to me, it's in black and white. You do something that I don't like, I'm going to give you a lesson. I'm going to just kill you off, and Aaron, you better pay attention now to me big time. Maybe you don't like what I'm saying, but that's what I believe.
Natalie, that was superb. That was superb. Thank you.
Okay.
You're getting into Svartvik's pre-understanding. You're understanding what he is attempting to teach Jonathan and then Kevin. Nope.
Talking about that, the fear that Natalie was just saying, I think that God is sort of imposing. To me, is a very resonant kind of fear that you hear from dictatorships, or fear is like you're not allowed to mourn your dead, or you're not allowed to express yourself. Aaron, his sons are dead. He has to be silent. They say other people, your kinsmen, they can mourn, but you have to not mourn because you're anointed with God's oil. You're the priest. You have special obligations. I think we look at our preconditions to try to find a lot of ways to interpret this in a much more positive way. And maybe those ways are there, or things I thought Howard said was, maybe there's something missing in this story. It was originally long and people understood it better. On the base, there's very negative things. It's like, you may not mourn your own dead. You have to pretend, you have to be silent, pretend that this is fine. God does this for his glory, that this gains glory among the people. It feels very bad, I think. The story, God comes off very poorly in it, and then we bring interpretations to it to try to make it feel much better, which maybe those interpretations are right, perhaps, but I think it does match a lot about what you're saying about how we have these preconditions that we bring to it to take the story and try to make it feel better.
Isn't it liberating to be free enough to say, I don't want your explanations, this is wrong. It can be liberating. Kevin.
Okay, well, first off, if we were Orthodox, we wouldn't question God's will. But I wanted to say the sons of Aaron are dead. They have no feelings, so they're not the ones that are punished. The one that is punished is Aaron, the father, and the father should have, taught his sons how to do the ritual. But did Aaron do something wrong that he's being punished, or is it just the ritual part?
You're doing great. I mean, you are where I was hoping you would be able to be. We are that way. Ray Kusaran, do you want to say your message out loud? I don't know. Maybe he's there. Okay. Ray sent a message. Where was that message? Okay, well, we have to leave that alone. Okay, anyone else up? Natalie, your hand is up?
Hi, it's Ray. I just unmuted if you still want me.
Well, we could take a vote. Yeah. Okay.
So I put a message to Natalie, but that's not private. You may read it too in the chat. And I was struck, Natalie, by the force with which you characterized most people who are religious as being in fear of God. And if I understood your words correctly, something to the effect of afraid of God's judgment, God's reaction to their behavior, conduct, comportment in some way. I'm now reading in, so I'll back off. But I just wanted to share with you and whoever was interested that I, number one, do consider myself religious, but number two, do not most days experience anything like fear of God that makes sense as fear. And I made 2 points in the chat that if anything, I'm afraid of human beings, especially those who wield power, who behave as gods, because I think power-hungry human beings are about the most nightmarish gods that we can have, and they do us tremendous damage, including, as Effie was alluding to only this week. And number two, I realize, and I'm sort of formulating this almost in this moment, I never really put it this way, that I think my experience of God is much like my experience of somebody benign, like a therapist, who uses silence in order to make a space for our own experience to speak to itself without distortion. So those are my two observations, which I shared much more economically in the chat.
I don't know about you guys. I'm having a good time.
Say what you want.
Some of you are absolutely miserable, and that makes me happy. Because we're dealing with this whole notion of pre-understanding. When we look at everything that happens, good, bad, or indifferent, we have a built-in commitment to understanding it this way or that way. And very often, God gets off in a legal sense. God is not going to be punished for requiring the Israelites to spend 250 years in slavery in Egypt. We're not going to say to God, hey, God, sir, ma'am, wouldn't there have been another way to redeem this people, bring them out? No, this is God's way, and we have been trained to accept God's way. And the question is, can we still hold fast to that? Is it still possible? When Jews think about God, and when Jews think about Mount Sinai and the Exodus, you have God choosing, saving, redeeming, giving, all those great things. So that becomes the lens through which we also see the horrors of our lives. How many deaths, God? How much pain? And Svartvik wants us to know that we are responsible for giving God a pass on what we experience. Just think about that. And that's why over the past few days, quite frankly, I was really trying to understand and read more and figure out. We just don't receive the world neutrally. Jim knows what's a good film. You evaluate on that basis. But is that really, I'm not challenging, Jim, I'm not challenging. Is that really objectively true? Or does it reflect your life, your experiences, and the people you admire?
Well, I think films are entirely subjective, and that's part of the magic, because they bring us closer to ourselves and our lived experience. And in a way, it's a litmus test for who we are, how we receive this material. It's a stimulation, it forces us to go deeper inside. So I think it's a tonic, for stasis and for arrogance. And it opens us, it makes us open to looking at ourselves, just like the preconditioning you were talking about. We have to examine our assumptions, and anything that helps us do that is a positive thing. So yeah, you can say this is better than that, but by what measure? It's less important of what does this make us think and feel.
We're doing so well. Thank you. We're gonna have to bring this to an end, but thank you for allowing me to open up a box, examine stuff that I don't fully understand yet, but I'm really curious as to what it means to go through life with pre-understandings. And what about objectivity? And what about truth? And what about the role of God, the role of humanity? We have been trained to view things in a given way. Shabbat Shalom. I want to open
Shabbat
up.
Shalom.
I want to open up another
Thank you
paragraph.
for making
Miller,
us think
Miller, you
beyond.
didn't say anything, but I'm waving at you anyway, okay? All right? And Jonathan, thank you for coming. And Barbara, hi. Eric.
Rabbi Davids.
Are you going to come back, Jonathan, or are you just going to leave the field to Howard?
I'm planning to come back. We'll see. Just depending, but I am planning to come back. I'd like to do more Torah study regularly, and this seemed like a really great place to go do it.
Fantastic. We'd love to see you.
Thank you.
We will now turn to Kaddish. We mentioned the names of those who have passed away during the past month. Sally Berman, Ted Byrne, Yuet Shun Ho Chan, Hillary Turtletop Costin, Mike Culver, Alan Elliott Feuerstein, Stanley Goldklang, Linda Hockman, Sid Kolpas, Coca Konar, Eunice Nazarian, Mehdi Al-Pursalimi, Gideon Rossner, Marcel Riesenberg, Jane Scheiber, Donald Van, Pearl Yeager, Nancy Zeman. and the following, the anniversaries of whose deaths have occurred during this past week. Goldie Appler, Richard Barish, Vernon Beck, Esther Bender, Ida Bernfeld, Peter Cohn, Marvin Connie, Sidney Davidson, Ellen Emmett, Harry Faggett, Munish Feinberg, Jack Feldman, John Gertis, Lillian Ginsberg, George Goldstein, Donald Greenberg, Jay Haddad, Ambrose Holtzman, Beverly Jacobs, Pat Jacobson, Leon Janal, Sandy Janko, Sophie Jasny, Stephen Karp, William J. Kend, Barry Kester, Doug Klein, Robert Klein, Samuel Klein, Al Kleiner, Marlene Cohn, Bernard Landau, Myron Levy, Beulah Levine, Cecile Levy, Saul Lieber, Ida Lieberman, Gilbert Lindheim, Manette London, George Mann, Neil Markman, Louis Mayers, Patrick John McCormick, Joseph Moses Miller, Rosanna Michelle, Jerome Muchin, Herb Nadich, Alida Naeem, Joseph Natker, Edith Newman, Bertha Nugent, Harry Perlman, Edgar Phillips, Sarita Pierce, Morton Pullman, Louis Reisman, Elizabeth Resnick, Sanford Rieger, Eva Roman, Esther Rosen, Helen Cohn Rosenblum, Susan Joan Rosenfeld, Field, Dina Rothenberg, Josephine Hartfield Samuels, Bessie Sanders, Leslie Sanders, Terry Sanders, Riva Sandler, Barry Shanbrum, Herzl Schlakaminovitz, Julian Serrati, Jake Silberkleit, Morris Silberstein, Herbert Sokol, Greta Solomon, Ida Sosno, Rosia B. Speed, Ruby Gantz Springle, Aurelia Martinez Tapia, Rosalie Turner, Leah Vayner, Jerry Waldman, Stanley Wallen, Stephen Weiss, Deverla Weiss, Richard Weissman, Rose Weisstein, Milton Wolf, Meyer Wajinska. If there are other names to be mentioned, please speak them aloud now. And
Mother Zahava Aranka Ross, Yardside.
Thank you.
Linda Roberts, who passed away a few days ago.
Thank you.
I didn't catch, you may have said it, but Ted Bird, my sister-in-law's father, who passed away.
Yes, Ted Bird's name was read, but that's fine. That's definitely fine. With apologies to those whose names I have mispronounced, bearing in mind also the names of those who have died in the Ukraine, those who died in defense of our country, those who died in defense of the state of Israel. We pray for peace. Yitkadal v'yitkadash Shemei Rabbah Be'alma Divra Chute Vayamlich Malchute V'chayechon of Yomechon V'chaye Dechol Beit Yisrael Ba'agala V'izman Kariv V'imru
Amen.
Amen.
Yehi Shmei Rabbah Mavarach Le'alam Yamei Amaya V'yiparach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitlamam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitpalau Shemei v'kurishah Le'elam min kol birchata v'shirata Tushbachata v'nechamata Ramiran b'alma v'imru amen Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim Amen. Says shalom bimromav. Yah says shalom. Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'al kol b'nei Adam bimru. Amen.
Amen.
May God, who makes peace in the high places, make peace in our hearts, make peace in our homes. Make peace in the household of Israel. Make peace among all the families and nations of earth. And let us say,
Amen.
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 Amen, amen. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom. Thank you all so
everybody.
much. So much.
Thank you for making us think so hard.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Travel safe.
Yeah, thank you. I'll be distributing a leave to get rid of the headaches in a while. I'm not satisfied yet either, so we're all got problems. But thank you all. Have a beautiful week. We'll see you next Shabbos. See you next
See you next
everybody.
week. Travel safely.
Well,
Apparently, there's a memorial for someone. Someone who's had a lot of fun speaking of something. You didn't give us exact details.